Welcome back. So I'll be reading an edited version of an article from the New Yorker written by Jennifer Gonnerman, and it was one of the Pulitzer Prize finalists for 2015, and the title of it is Before the Law, and it's about Kalief Browder, and you'll hear more about him in the article. And this is, as I said, an edited version of what she wrote. And the question I'm asking and answering here is, who profits from the over-incarceration of Black and brown people in the prison industrial complex? In the early hours of Saturday, May 15, 2010, 10 days before his 17th birthday, Kalief Browder and a friend were returning home from a party in the Belmont section of the Bronx. They walked along Arthur Avenue, the main street of Little Italy, past bakeries and cafes with their metal shutters pulled down for the night. As they passed East 186th Street, Browder saw a police car driving toward them. More squad cars arrived, and soon Browder and his friend found themselves squinting in the glare of a police spotlight. An officer said that a man had just reported that they had robbed him. "I didn't rob anybody," Browder replied. "You can check my pockets." The officers searched him and his friend, but found nothing. As Browder recalls, one of the officers walked back to his car where the alleged victim was and returned with a new story. The man said that they had robbed him not that night, but 2 weeks earlier. The police handcuffed the teens and pressed them into the back of a squad car. "What am I charged for?" Browder asked. "I didn't do anything." He remembers an officer telling them, "We're just going to take you to the precinct. Most likely you can go home." Browder whispered to his friend, "Are you sure you didn't do anything?" His friend insisted that he hadn't. Who profits from this? Maybe the police? Profits from the over-incarceration? At the 48th precinct, the pair were fingerprinted and locked into a holding cell. A few hours later, when an officer opened the door, Browder jumped up. "I can leave now?" Instead, the teens were taken to a central booking at the Bronx County Criminal Courtroom. Do the staff at the Bronx County Criminal Court profit from the over-incarceration of Black and brown people? Browder had already had a few run-ins with the police, including an incident 8 months earlier when an officer reported seeing him take a delivery truck for a joyride and crashed into a parked car. Sounds like some mischievous teenage prank. Browder was charged with grand larceny. He told me that his friends drove the truck and that he had only watched, but he figured that he had no defense, and so he pleaded guilty. The judge gave him probation and youthful offender status, which ensured that he wouldn't have a criminal record. He did not have a criminal record. Late on Saturday, 17 hours after the police picked Browder up, an officer and a prosecutor interrogated him, and he again maintained his innocence. The next day, he was led into a courtroom where he learned that he had just been charged with robbery, grand larceny, and assault. The judge released his friend, permitting him to remain free while the case moved through the courts. But because Browder was still on probation, the judge ordered him to be held and set bail at $3,000. The amount was out of the reach for his family, and soon Browder found himself aboard a Department of Correction bus. He fought back panic, he told me later. Staring through the grating on the bus window, he watched the Bronx disappear. Soon there was water on either side as the bus made its way across a long, narrow bridge to Rikers Island. Who profits? Maybe the staff on Rikers Island, the people who drive the bus. Male adolescents are confined in the Robert N. Daverin Center, known as RNDC. When Browder arrived, the jail held 600 boys and age 16 to 18. Conditions there are notoriously grim. In the August of this year, 2014, then, a report by the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York described RNDC as a place with a deep-seated culture of violence, where attacks by officers and amongst inmates are rampant. The report featured a list of inmate injuries: broken jaws, broken orbital bones, broken noses, long bone fractures, and lacerations requiring stitches. Imagine going to a place to be reformed, but there's more violence there than when you were outside. Browder's family could not afford to hire an attorney, so the judge appointed a lawyer named Brendan O'Mara to represent him. Browder told O'Mara that he was innocent and assumed that his case would conclude quickly. Even the assistant district attorney handling the prosecution later acknowledged in court papers that it was a relatively straightforward case. There weren't hours of wiretaps or piles of complicated evidence to sift through. There was just the memory of one alleged victim. But Browder had entered the legal system through the Bronx criminal courts, which are chronically overwhelmed. Did you know that the Bronx is the poorest borough of the 5 boroughs? And isn't it like so appropriate or inappropriate that they have the worst system, the slowest, right? We know that poverty breeds crime, and now we know they have the worst system. Last year, the Times, in an extended expose, described them as crippled and among the most backlog in the country. One reason is budgetary, but there are not nearly enough judges and court staff to handle the workload. In 2010, Browder's case was one of 5,695 felonies that the Bronx District Attorney's Office prosecuted. The problem is compounded by defense attorneys who drag out cases to improve their odds of winning, judges who permit endless adjournments, prosecutors who are perpetually unprepared. Although the Sixth Amendment of the U.S. Constitution guarantees the right to a speedy and public trial in the Bronx, the concept of speedy justice barely exists. In the Bronx, the Constitution of the U.S. government barely exists. Who profits from the over-incarceration of black and brown bodies? For as long as Browder could remember, he had lived in the same place, a 2-story brick house near the Bronx Zoo. He was the youngest of 7 siblings. Except for the oldest 2, all the children were adopted, and the mother fostered other children as well. Kalief was the last brought into the family. An older brother told me, by the time it came to Kalief, my mom had already raised in foster care or adoption a total of 34 kids. Kalief was the smallest, he recalled, so my mom called him Peanut. Already abandoned by his parents, taken in by this woman. She didn't have the $3,000. As a child, Browder loved Pokemon. We free Wednesdays at the Bronx Zoo and mimicking his brother's workout routine. At 6 years old, he had an 8-pack. His brother said when Browder was 10, their father, who worked as a subway cleaner, moved out, though he continued to help support the family. For high school, Browder went to the small progressive New Day Academy. A former staff member remembered him as a fun guy, the type of kid others wanted to be around. Occasionally, he would grab a hall pass, sneak into a friend's classroom, and stay until the teacher caught on. He told me that his report cards were full of C's, but the staff member I spoke to said, I thought he was very smart. Inside our NDC, Browder soon realized that he was not going to make many friends. He was assigned to a dorm where 50 teenage boys slept in an open room, each with a plastic bucket to store his possession in. Their conversations bored me, he told me. As far as he could tell, the other inmates were interested in only in crimes they had committed and girls that they did. When Browder asked the guard how inmates were supposed to get their clothes cleaned, he was told that they had to wash them themselves. He thought this was a joke until he noticed other inmates scrubbing their clothes by hand using their bucket and jailhouse soap. After he did the same and hung his wet clothes on the rail of his bed, he wound up with brown rust stains on his white t-shirt, his socks, and his boxers. That day he told himself, "I don't know how I'm going to live in this place." Browder's mother visited every weekend in the visiting room. He would hand her his dirty clothes and get a sack of freshly laundered clothes in return. She also put money in jail commissary account for him. Jail commissary profits from the incarceration. So he could buy snacks. He knew that such privileges made him a target for his fellow prisoners who would take any opportunity to empty someone else's bucket of snacks and clothes. So he slept with his head off the side of his bed atop his bucket. To survive inside RNDC, he decided the best strategy was to keep himself up and to work out. Before Rikers, he told me, every here and there I did a couple pull-ups or push-ups. When I went in there, that's when I decided I wanted to get big. The day room was ruled over by a gang leader and his friends who controlled inmates' access to the prison phones and dictated who could sit on a bench to watch TV and who had to sit on the floor. A lot of times I'd say, "I'm not sitting on the floor," Browder said, and then they'd come with 5 or 6 dudes. They'd swing on me and I'd have to fight back. There's no escape, no protection, and a suspicion that some of the guards had an agreement with the gang members. Browder told me that one night soon after he arrived, a group of guards lined him and several other inmates up against the wall, trying to figure out who had been responsible for an earlier fight. "They're talking to us about why did we jump these guys," he said, and they're punching us one by one. Browder said that he had nothing to do with the fight, but still the officers beat him. The other inmates endured much worse. Their noses were leaking, their faces were bloody, their eyes were swollen, he said. Afterwards, the officers gave the teens a choice: go to the medical clinic or go back to bed. But they made it clear if that the inmates went to the clinic and told the medical staff what had happened, they would write up charges against them and get them sent to solitary confinement. "I just told them I'll act like nothing happened," Browder said. "So they didn't send us to the clinic. They didn't write anything up. They just sent us back." The Department of Corrections refused to respond to these allegations or to answer any questions about Browder's stay on Rikers. But the recent U.S. Attorney's report about RNDC recounts many instances in which the officers pressured inmates not to report beatings, to hold it down in Rikers parlance. So I'm going to stop here. But I think you got who profits. The last people we're seeing profiting is the Department of Corrections, right? And the staff there who profits from the over-incarceration of Black and brown bodies. Who profits? So you tell me who you think profits. Thank you so much for listening.